Aloha Friday, and welcome to Stan the Energy Man. And glad to have you here. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I've had guests on for the last 4 shows, and I want to try something a little bit different today and just spend a little bit of time with you and talk to you about some really cool things that are happening in the world around hydrogen. So this is Hydrogen Today, and I'm going to talk about everything from making hydrogen to hydrogen future and transportation. But first, I'd like to start off with some stray voltage, and it kind of ties to the show that Jay just did, talking about the media. There's so much information out there today, and there's more and more every day. I once was told that in the 1800s, it took 100 years to double your knowledge. And then as time went by, it shortened to weeks, days, months. Now we're doubling the knowledge of our planet in hours and not even a full day. Well, what happens when you double that knowledge so quickly? There's so much out there that you have to sort through. You have to start trusting the people that you listen to. And that's important because we have important decisions and important things going on in our state and in our nation and in energy. And so it's important that you develop a good relationship with the people that you get your information from and make sure you can trust them. So just something to think about. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about energy and start off with energy in its purest form. In fact, I brought my good Wikipedia definition and start off with what energy really is. In the physical term, in physics, energy is a property of objects which can be transferred to other objects or converted into different forms but cannot be created or destroyed. A more common way of thinking about it is our ability of a system to perform work. But there's all kinds of energy. There's kinetic energy, potential energy, mechanical wave energy, chemical energy, electric, magnetic, radiant, nuclear, ionization, elastic, gravitational, rest, thermal, heat, and mechanical work. So you can see there's a lot of different types of energy that are out there. And we deal with all those energies when we're doing power on our grid and energy in our vehicles. The other word that people interchange a lot is the word power. Well, power isn't just energy. Power is energy over time. And if you look at the definition for that, power is the rate of doing work. It's equivalent to an amount of energy consumed for a unit of time. So when you talk about power, you talk about miles per hour, you talk about horsepower, you talk about British thermal units when you're talking temperature energy. You're talking watts when you're talking about electrical energy. And a lot of times it's hard to compare all those different types of energy and types of power because it's like apples and oranges. So a lot of times when we start to talk about things like battery plug-in vehicles and hydrogen vehicles and what's on the grid and AC power and DC power, it's hard to really talk about that without getting a little bit more into the details. And most people out there don't have the time to sit there and study physics books and get into the dirty details about what's better in terms of electrical or internal combustion engines. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences that we run into in transportation, because that's kind of my basic focus in my daily job is at the Hawaii Center for Advanced Transportation Technology is transportation energy. So let's talk a little bit about efficiency and different kinds of vehicles that we use. We use internal combustion engines right now in most of our vehicles, whether they're diesel or whether they're gasoline. But when you think about it, when we started in transportation, we didn't start with internal combustion engines. Believe it or not, most of the vehicles on the road early on were electric vehicles. And you kind of ask yourself, then how did we get into gas-powered vehicles? Well, it's pretty easy. In early electric vehicles, although every engineer will tell you an electric motor is more efficient and gives you better performance than an internal combustion engine, the problem is, in the olden days, they couldn't store the energy. They couldn't store enough energy in batteries to give an electric vehicle any kind of range. And therefore, when gasoline came along and internal combustion engines matured and the battery didn't get any better, we went to internal combustion engines and oil. And oil became a big industry, and automobile industry became focused on internal combustion engines. But that's not necessarily the best way to go. So what's happened recently? Well, now we have battery technology that's matured and electric motors that have always been more efficient. And we've had companies that learn to put them together and come up with some great vehicles. So nowadays we have a lot of plug-in electric vehicles. But another thing is happening, and I like to use my hands for this one, so pardon me, but it used to be that the grid was over here and transportation energy was over here. And never the twain shall meet. But then we started plugging in our cars to get power off the grid. Well, now we're beginning to recognize that those batteries in the cars can put energy back on the grid. And then we have new electric cars called hydrogen fuel cell cars, and they could give electricity back to the grid, and they can also use excess electricity to make hydrogen. So the transportation world and the grid world are getting intertwined in ways they never have been before. And it's time for us to look at those connections and maybe adjust our aperture and start looking at what we do in transportation and what we do in the grid in a little bit different way. So as we do that, let's talk a little bit about internal combustion engines. If you had an internal combustion engine in your car, which you probably do, and you took all the oil out of it, and you took all the water out of the radiator, and you ran your internal combustion engine, which I don't recommend, by the way, taking the oil and the water out of your car, you'd get about half a block before your dashboard lit up with all the lights that said, not just check engine, but it might even shut down your engine so it won't damage itself. Why is that? Well, internal combustion engines have a lot of moving parts and a lot of friction. If you take the oil out of the engine, you get a lot more friction. And even with oil in the engine, your engine heats up because of the internal combustion and the gases that heat up in the engine. So what does that mean, though? What does that mean when you have all that heat? Well, if you talk to an engineer, he'll tell you that heat is a sign of energy, wasted energy. So people say, Stan, what's the difference in efficiency between an internal combustion engine and a regular engine? And why is it better to have an electric motor for your technology? Well, at the very best, for most of the engineers I've talked to, an internal combustion engine is only about 30% efficient. And you think about that, and that makes sense, because you're throwing away an awful lot of heat that has to be dissipated by your radiator, or you'll literally cook your engine. So think of how much heat goes out of an engine, and that's a lot of wasted energy. So look at the motor. Does it get warm? Yep, it gets warm and it throws off some heat, but nowhere near what the internal combustion engine does. Therefore, when you talk to the engineers about how efficient motors are, they'll tell you the electric motors are much more efficient. So we've gone through this transition of growing a big internal combustion engine market, and then we also know that electric motors are good. So what did we get to today? Well, thanks to Toyota and other companies that worked on hybrid vehicles, and GM did quite a bit of work on that as well. We come to the point where we have hybrids. Now, what's the difference between a hybrid vehicle and a regular internal combustion vehicle? Well, a hybrid vehicle takes both the electric side of the motor and the internal combustion engine and combines them. And why do you do that, and why does it make it more efficient? Well, a hybrid internal combustion engine is an engine designed to run at a specific RPM and put out a specific amount of power at a constant rate. Now, that's a fairly efficient engine for an internal combustion engine, because what kills us in traffic in our normal internal combustion engines is accelerating and decelerating. Because when I say an engine is 30% efficient, that's at its max. But when you have to accelerate and decelerate, you're taking that engine through regimes where they're not very efficient at all, and their efficiency is down in the 10 or less than that percent. So a hybrid engine is a regular engine that runs at a constant speed and runs a generator that generates electricity. So you either need the generator running or you don't. So when you don't need the generator, the motor turns off and you're running off your battery. So if your car is coasting down a hill and you're using regenerative braking to charge your batteries, on your hybrid car, the engine might actually shut off because you don't need it. So that's how hybrids get such good mileage. They use an internal combustion engine, but they use it at its max efficiency, or they shut it off, and it gives you all the power that you need for your electric motor. So hybrid vehicles are basically electric vehicles. Plug-in vehicles are electric vehicles, and hydrogen vehicles are electric vehicles. So what's the difference? A lot of it is just how you're storing your energy. In batteries, you store your energy the way we're accustomed to in batteries, either lithium batteries or lead-acid batteries. But in fuel cell vehicles, you store it with hydrogen, and you produce your electricity from hydrogen. And in the show today, we're going to show you that process of converting water to hydrogen and oxygen, and then converting it back into water, and why that's not just magic, and why it's not voodoo, why it actually works. So we'll look at that technology very closely. But let's talk a little bit more about hybrids. The other thing that we talked about was using a regular engine, a gas engine or diesel engine. That's just another energy carrier. Just like a battery and just like hydrogen, gasoline is energy storage. So is coal, so is wood. That's why in the olden days when they had steam engines, they had coal or wood-fired steam boilers, and that was how you stored your energy. You stored it safely in a block of wood or a chunk of coal, you threw it in your boiler, created heat and steam, and that gave you your power to run your engine, run your ship, run your vehicle, run your train. So in short, there's lots of different kinds of energy, and there's different ways to make power. And so what we're gonna do after the break is we're gonna talk about what we can do to use different kinds of energy and different kinds of power, but we're gonna focus on hydrogen power. And we'll look at some ways that you make hydrogen, we'll look at ways that you can store hydrogen and use it, and we'll look at some of the companies that are stepping out and bringing you new and exciting ways of transporting yourself in your car using hydrogen. So, yeah, we're ready to go to a commercial now. So we'll take a quick break and we'll get back with you shortly. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Jim Sean, and I'm host of a show called Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Each week, live streaming at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii, we interview people who have special insights into education from early education through K-12, all the way through higher education and beyond. Both public and private are areas we're interested in. We dig deeper, we try to find out what it's really like to be involved in making change, advocating for it, how you reform, what people's philosophies are in reforming it. As I said, we're live streaming every Wednesday at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii, and later on, you can find these interviews on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center website. We hope you join us as many times as possible. Aloha.
Well, welcome back to my lunch break on Friday and Stan the Energy Man. We got a tweet from Mark Ward. Not quite sure I'm going to be able to answer it because it's not quite really a question, but it says, we have advanced in transportation technology in so many ways, but not as much as one might think. Is it ability or simply a paradigm? No, I think that technology has actually helped us improve our transportation systems. But the whole transportation puzzle is so complex. I work on the mechanics, I work on the vehicles, and I work on the technology that runs transportation in a mechanical sense. But if you look at what the rest of our state's doing, like with the State Energy Office and some of the other agencies that we're working with, they're looking at what they call the work, live, play concept of you live closer to where you work closer to where you play, and they set up communities where you don't have to depend so much on transportation. I think that's a paradigm shift and a pretty advanced technological way of looking at improving transportation. Bike lanes, how we use bike lanes, bike share, different ways of using taxi cabs, eco-taxi cabs. All those are part of an advanced transportation shift that is not just mechanical like what I deal with, but it's ways that we start to look at transportation in a holistic sense and make it make Hawaii a better place and make it cleaner by A, reducing the amount of transportation that you have to do, and then B, working on the different modes of transportation and making them cleaner and better. So I hope that answered your question, Mark, but if it didn't, tweet back and we'll clarify and get better. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about hydrogen, which is kind of my passion. In fact, I just requested a new license plate for my car from the city and county, and it's available, so I'm waiting to get it on there. It's called H2 Guru. My wife doesn't like it, but I think I'm gonna stick with it. Anyway, I love hydrogen, and the more that I learn about it, the more years I spend studying it, the more I really appreciate it. And hydrogen is such a cool element. It's number one on the table of elements. It's light, it's great, it does so much stuff. So over these next few shows, I'm gonna be talking to you about hydrogen. But we've got a little video that's not professional, it's not great, but it shows a really simple, in my mind, a simple way of showing you how simple the technology is of making hydrogen. So if we can cue the video, we'll get you going on that and show you what it looks like. As the power's on, you'll see bubbles kicking off. The bubbles on the left are from hydrogen, and that's on the negative terminal of the battery or the power source, and it's giving you hydrogen. If you'll notice in the volume, there's less oxygen coming out of the right side. Why? Because it's H2O. For every hydrogen atom, there's two hydrogen atoms, there's one oxygen atom. So you're getting about half the volume on the oxygen side as you are on the other side. So she's going to put a balloon on both sides and let them blow up, and then we'll fast forward to a later part of the video. But this is really how basic it is to make hydrogen using a process called electrolysis. And you can use salt water, you can use an alkaline-based water, you can use virtually any kind of water to make hydrogen. So if you look around the islands here and you look at how much water we have, you go, this is a no-brainer. I mean, we could be making all the energy we need into hydrogen and storing that hydrogen to use in our vehicles or our grid or whatever, right off of the electricity that we can get from sunlight or wind or ocean thermal or anything else, and turning in and storing that energy, all those different kinds of energy, in hydrogen and keeping it to use at a later time. So this is about 3 hours later, and you can see after 3 hours, these two little plastic things are pretty full. The hydrogen one's really full, and the oxygen one is appreciably full. But here's the neat part. Once it's taken off of there, there's the difference. If you took the oxygen one off, it'd probably just sit on the table. But as you remember from the early 1800s or mid-1800s, one of the principal uses for hydrogen was to put in observation balloons so that people could float up and look at their enemy's targets and tell their troops where to go and their artillery where to shoot, because hydrogen is lighter than air. In fact, it's so much lighter than air that it flies up in the air at 45 miles an hour if you just let it loose outside. And there it goes, up in the air, quick as can be. So we do a lot of work with firefighters and other folks to talk about hydrogen safety. And one of the amazing things about hydrogen when you start to look at it from a safety perspective is this principle that it wants to go straight up and it goes up quickly. So even if you released a bunch of hydrogen in a building, it wants to go up to the sky and go up to the top of your roof, and it'll find any kind of vent or hole going out, and it'll depart the building. So hydrogen has a lot of nifty things about it, and it's a lot safer than most people think. And when we go through a full-blown hydrogen safety course like we do with the fire department, they start to really appreciate the safety in hydrogen. And I think we'll probably have a show in the future that'll talk about it. We have another video coming up that we'll talk about, and it's a great video by Toyota. In fact, I have a couple videos from Toyota here, and I need to throw a disclaimer in here. These are public videos that are out on YouTube and they're available, and Toyota has produced them. I don't work for Toyota, I don't own a Toyota, I don't sell Toyotas. And we're not saying, Toyota should go out and purchase a Toyota. But I will tell you from an energy standpoint that they make some of the greatest videos about the new technology out there as part of their promotion and what they're doing. And so one of these videos, the first one we have, talks a little bit about how energy got started in the US and how
it would happen in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The story begins with the arrival of Colonel Edwin Drake to inspect a strange spring that bubbled oil.
We were standing just feet away from the original production oil well, drilled by Colonel Edwin L. Drake. Basically, it was the very first time that man could get oil out of the ground in any kind of amount. This is Titusville's motto, welcome to the valley that changed the world.
Our tagline is, the birthplace of the oil industry. If you look at the first census, there were maybe 200 people. Then the oil boom hit, and this place exploded.
We had thousands of people pouring into the oil region, and they started punching holes in the ground everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Oil Creek is where oil was first found. That's why it's called Oil Creek. It was the lifeblood of the area.
We used it for the transportation, we used it for business. We wouldn't exist if we hadn't had that creek. I know, it's creek. Well,
vehicles, electrolysis, and several other things that we're going to be studying here in the near future. I'd like to introduce our special guest speaker today.
Hi everybody, I'm Larry Moulthrop. I'm a chemical engineer. I graduated way back in the dark ages in 1978.
Titusville prides itself as being the beginning of the transportation revolution. We're now on the cusp of a new revolution in transportation based on hydrogen.
I see an opportunity to bring these ideas together, and how about if you help me go gather some water from Oil Creek, and I can convert that water using electrolysis to create hydrogen and power a fuel cell vehicle. We can bring that vehicle back here, and together we can tell the story of how we're powering the next phase in transportation. Will you guys help me?
Sure.
Yeah? You into it?
Yeah.
All right. As you can see today, hydrogen is everywhere.
Before we had drilled for oil here in Titusville, Native Americans would skim oil off the top of the water. I thought it was pretty cool that we're actually coming back to Oil Creek and we're just taking the water out.
With the water we collected, 150 gallons worth, that's enough to electrolyze and fill over a dozen Toyota Mirais. Water electrolysis allows you to take energy, renewable energy when it's available, channel it into the electrolyzer and break apart these water molecules. You now have potential energy in the form of gaseous hydrogen. So put that into a Mirai, combine it with oxygen from the atmosphere, and now you can power the vehicle. I want to see how excited they are to explain to the people in Titusville what their perspective is, how they view rich traditions established here in Titusville, and how they view this new innovation based on hydrogen.
It may sound like it's just a theory at this point, but if you follow me, I will show you the actual car, the water from Oil Creek outside.
A simple science experiment that we've been doing since middle school, and it's actually being used in cars and making them run.
Through innovation, mankind can seek things out and grow and change.
I never thought that my little town would be part of such a big thing, but now I'm actually driving the real car, and it feels awesome.
To bring it back here to Titusville, where we started the oil industry, it's a proud moment. It really is.
So there's a snapshot of how oil started in America and the transition all the way to where I like to be, which is hydrogen. When you look at hydrogen and you think about all the renewable sources we have in Hawaii for electricity or the production of hydrogen using that very clean process called electrolysis, you begin to appreciate where my head's at when I start talking transportation energy. We have sunlight, we have wind, we have geothermal, we have ocean thermal. We have ocean wave motion. We have waste to energy. We have anaerobic digesters that can digest human waste and agricultural waste and turn it into hydrogen. There's tons of ways of making hydrogen, and they're all here in Hawaii. So why do we need to import oil for our cars and for our grid? We should be able to use it all. And a good way to store all that energy is in hydrogen. This next video that's coming up is also a Toyota video, and it's one of my favorite videos, and you'll understand why as soon as it's rolling. So we'll go ahead and hit the second video. I think you'll like it.
Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. It's in almost everything, from water to trees to grass. That's what makes hydrogen such an exciting fuel. But the critics have been vocal. Some have even gone so far as to call bullshit. And they're right, but not in the way they think. I'm an engineer, and these are cows. And all of this manure has hydrogen in it. Let's see if we can use that hydrogen to get a car to really run on bullshit. Let's go. So I'm on my way to meet Ron. He's a dairy farmer. He's got a beautiful little family-run dairy and lots of manure, and that's just what I'm looking for. Wow, Ron, look at this.
Yeah, this is the stuff.
So what do you see when you see these piles?
Manure.
When I look at these piles, I see an enormous amount of energy. And I was hoping we could run a little experiment with your help.
Right.
I'd like to see if we can take manure, strip the hydrogen out of it, and use that hydrogen to power a car.
That sounds crazy, but let's do it.
All right, Ron, thank you so much. I'll bring you back for the good part.
Look forward to it.
All right. So now that we have our truckload of manure, we're on our way to the digester, which is basically a big poo lagoon that breaks down our manure and releases some lovely smelling raw biogas. Then we're collecting some purified gas off the other end and taking it to a steam methane reformer. This is where the real magic happens. Using steam and heat, we can strip out the hydrogen, which should then be able to power our vehicle. A moment of truth. You want to drive?
I would.
All right.
Well, it started.
Well, I told you it could be done, and here we are.
This is great.
It's great, huh? Did you ever think we'd be sitting here, driving a car on that Commodore?
It seemed like a stretch.
No combustion engine in this car. The hydrogen and the oxygen from the air come together in that fuel cell, and it makes DC electricity.
That's incredible.
And it doesn't even smell. But there's many other ways to get the hydrogen. We just demonstrated one with this process.
We're driving down the road, running on bullshit.
All right, that's one of my favorite video clips. And again, I don't work for Toyota, but I sure appreciate the fact that they've invested some money in some great media to talk about the technology that I love. So I thank you, the folks at Toyota, for letting me borrow that, and I'll keep showing it as long as they'll keep letting me show it. Okay, it's time for us to take another break, and we'll get back with you in a few minutes.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar, here on ThinkTech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk, where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching ThinkTech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
And you there, lad? It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you can see my lips moving.
So welcome back to Stan the Energy Man. So we've kind of talked about a lot of stuff here. In the last segment, we focused on making hydrogen and different ways to make hydrogen through a steam methane reformer based on anaerobic digestion from a big poo farm. But the methane comes from the landfill at Kailua as well. Right now, we're just burning that methane off so that it doesn't go into the air as methane, because methane is actually one of your worst greenhouse gases. So we want to do something with methane, and that's just one of the options. So you learned about electrolysis, which is clean. You learned about steam reforming off of methane gas, which is a way of cleaning up methane gas so it doesn't create greenhouse gases. And we have tons of renewables in Hawaii to use to make hydrogen. And so let's get back to the discussion of batteries versus hydrogen. Right now, if you have a battery-powered vehicle, you're either going to have a really heavy vehicle that can go a long ways because it has a lot of batteries in it, or you're going to have a fairly lightweight vehicle that can only go maybe 75 to 100 miles because otherwise you got a car full of batteries. So what's the whole thing behind hydrogen? Why is everybody so serious about hydrogen? It's because it's a very light element. It can be compressed into some very safe, high-pressure tanks, put in your car, and you can drive the same distance that you're used to driving now before you fill up. 300 miles, 350 miles. It's just really keeps the driving experience much like what you have with your car now that you fill up with gasoline, but now you're doing it with hydrogen and it extends that range. So in the next video, I want to talk a little bit and show you a little bit about what it makes to take that hydrogen and turn it into electricity. Because you're not really burning it, although you can burn hydrogen. In fact, a friend of mine, Paul on the Big Island at Blue Planet Research, has a hydrogen grill that he loves to bust out and start cooking on. And he's a pretty good cook, by the way. And we'll have him on the show sometime, and maybe we'll bring his hydrogen grill with us. But in a fuel cell vehicle, you don't actually burn the hydrogen. You put it into a process, much like a battery, that starts electrons flowing around a circuit that gives you power to run a motor. So in the last video here, we'll show you a little bit about how you turn that hydrogen into power.
The Mirai fuel cell vehicle runs on electricity generated by a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen. Toyota's newly developed fuel cell stack provides world-class power performance with reduced size and weight. The new Toyota FC stack is compact enough to fit below the vehicle's floor, thereby lowering the center of gravity and in turn enhancing cornering performance. The Mirai is a brand new breed of car that combines sheer driving fun with truly remarkable eco performance. The fuel cell stack is composed of 370 cells, and each of these cells work to generate electricity to drive the motor. Hydrogen supplied to the cells have their electrons removed at the catalyst layer and become protons. Oxygen taken from the air bond with electrons and protons transferred through the electrolyte membrane to produce water. The flow of electrons released from this reaction becomes the electricity that drives the vehicle's motor. Compared with conventional fuel cell stacks, Toyota's new fuel cell stack features a catalyst with even higher reactivity and a thinner electrolyte membrane, bringing improved proton conductivity. The diffusion layer is also thinner and less dense, leading to enhanced diffusion. With these developments, electrode reaction was improved significantly. The new fuel cell stack utilizes the world's first 3D fine mesh flow field, which contributes to improved electricity generation performance. With conventional straight channel, some of the generated water can accumulate easily within the cells, inhibiting electricity generation. The 3D fine mesh flow field provides an even supply of air onto the surface of the cells, while smoothly expelling the water resulting from electricity generation, thereby preventing water accumulation. The development of high-performance electrodes and the 3D fine mesh flow field has led to world-class electricity generation performance. The Mirai is not only remarkably environment-friendly thanks to its revolutionary fuel cell technology, it is also user-friendly and fun to drive.
And mahalo again to Toyota for making these great videos. I really appreciate them because they do such a good job at explaining this technology and making it so that the average person can understand it without having a PhD. And I like to use it a lot. But by no means is Toyota the only company that's looking at this technology. In fact, I think that's one of the really neat things I found out when I started this job a couple of years ago, is that I expected that technology was really for fleet vehicles and things like that. We'd be focusing on fleet vehicles with this technology before we ever started looking at cars. In fact, one of the quips that you'll hear about hydrogen is the fuel of the future, and it always will be. But I actually think that we're at a turning point right now, a turning point where hydrogen technology, not just for transportation, but also as energy storage for the grid, is at a turning point where we're going to see things accelerate. And especially here in Hawaii, I think you're going to see things in the hydrogen field accelerate to the point where we'll start leading the nation and hopefully the world in hydrogen and renewable energy. At least that's my personal goal. But Mercedes-Benz is teamed up with Ford, GM has teamed up with Honda, BMW has announced that they'll have a production hydrogen fuel cell vehicle by 2020. Hyundai has already got a production vehicle, the Santa Fe, and they're driving on the streets of California right now. We're looking at Mirais, and hopefully Hyundai is coming to Honolulu over the next year or two, and certainly by the next turnover of the decade, by 2020, I'm hoping to see every major manufacturer in production of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and having those vehicles here on the street. Mr. Dave Rolfe of the Hawaii Auto Dealers Association has a really unique chart. I should have brought it with me. I'll probably bring it for a future show, where it shows the approximation of when we should see hydrogen vehicles starting to accelerate and become more common in our community. And it's right about the 2020 time when you really start seeing an appreciable number of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. But like I say, hydrogen is just a way of storing energy, just like a battery, just like gasoline, just like other fuels. But the neat thing about hydrogen is it's clean, it's carbon free, and if you pair it up with renewable energy to store your energy that you produce during the daylight and keep that energy for nighttime use hydrogen to put electricity back on the grid, you stay completely green and completely clean. And you don't go buying oil from the Middle East or from any place else. So that's one of the big advantages of using hydrogen and working with hydrogen. So some of the things that have been happening lately is this past legislature, I was really fortunate, I think, to watch some bills go through the legislature having to do with hydrogen. And one of them was House Bill 1296, and went through the entire House side, all the committees, and people were a little critical because originally the bill, which was introduced by Sharon Moriwaki and the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, it talked about standing up a hydrogen not administration, a hydrogen authority that would oversee the implementation of hydrogen in the state of Hawaii. Well, as that bill moved through the committees in the House, people were criticizing it as being just another bureaucracy and costing more money. But it did cross over to the Senate, which kind of surprised me and a lot of folks. When it got to the Senate, it hit some pretty hard barriers. And I don't usually submit testimony at the legislature because I have to submit it all the way through DBED. And a lot of times that's just too much work, too much for me to go through. But I do show up at the hearings. So when it got to the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate, Senator Wakai asked me to sit at the table and talk to him about this bill. But he asked me, Stan, if I pull all the money out of this bill and it doesn't have any money in it, and we make you the hydrogen implementation coordinator, will you still do what this bill says? And I said, yes, I'll do that. So HCAT, the director of HCAT is me, and that in the bill, which became law on the 8th of June, signed by the governor, makes me the hydrogen implementation coordinator for the state of Hawaii. And I take that job very seriously. So trust me, when I say we're gonna make hydrogen start moving, we're gonna make hydrogen start moving. And I'm gonna do everything I can to do it, and not do it on the state's dime, but to get private investors engaged so they can start off the right way. And do the economically correct thing, which is, hey, if there's a market, fill the market, make some money, and generate jobs, because that's what we should be doing. So as a last closing video, again from Toyota, thanks again, Toyota, I've got a short video that really is more subtle and more esoterical, a little bit of a way to look at hydrogen and say, hey, this is what we should be doing.
Over the next year, we'll be faced with a decision to support, oppose, or even ignore the future of hydrogen-fueled propulsion. While there's no doubt that the need for an alternative to fossil fuel is real, the debate around hydrogen will intensify. There will be the naysayers, the handbrakes who say that it can't be done, that it's unsafe, that there's no infrastructure to support it. Then there'll be the trailblazers, the first to put up their hand and put down their foot. The bold few, driven to be remembered as those who made a difference, and perhaps the ones who made all the difference. So, as we travel down this hydrogen-paved highway, ready to mark a turning point in history, the question isn't if you'll turn, it's when.
So we're back, and thanks for being with me on Energy Friday with Stan the Energy Man. And I hope I've given you some things to think about with regards to hydrogen. And I hope you'll join me, because I do plan to bring hydrogen into the limelight over the next few years in Hawaii, and I'm looking for your help. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week Friday on Stan the Energy Man.